Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Cunler, and I'm here with Francisco del Pino, an Argentinian composer living in the United States at Princeton at the moment. And we're here to talk a little bit about his music, and most notably the new piece for tuba and piano and euphonium and piano that he's recently written. So, Francisco, it's always great to see you, even though we
Hey,
spent the
Matthew.
last 20 minutes talking. This is the official
Yeah.
interview. Can you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself, how uh, your musical life in Argentina, and then how you came to the United States?
Yeah. Thank you for the invitation, by the way. And yeah, I am a composer and guitarist. And I grew up as an electric guitar player. I quit playing for a long time while I was studying classical composition, and then I started uh, an ongoing process of mixing all these different musical styles in one hopefully unique path. But yeah, I studied composition in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where I teached also for a long time. And since the fall of 2020, I am living in Princeton. I am currently in my second year of the PhD in music composition. So uh, very busy.
Indeed, and so we met a few years ago due to another work for brass that you had written, your trombone
Mhm.
uh, duo, and so when the last time we spoke, when I got to interview you past time, you talked a lot about the influence of counterpoint, and that was something that
Mhm.
you taught a lot about. Could you speak just a little bit more about, when those who are listening to your music, you spoke about mixing a number of styles. Could you give us just a small list of the things that you hope is being clearly mixed into what I think is a really unique musical voice?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, um, like I said, I think I come mostly from a song-oriental performance background. I mean, before studying serious composition, I think my school was not only learning music by ear and playing with records and all that classical stuff, but also I had the lack of working with a couple of very good songwriters back home, and like playing in bands or sort of song related projects in which I wasn't usually the composer. I was more like the guy in the background, who is like building the whole soundscape and the shape of things, and like an arranger of sorts. And I always felt like I had a kind of a composer approach to my guitar playing, so I've never been very into guitar solos, for instance, like noodling around blues licks or whatever. It's like I always like to to write parts, like actual parts, even if in a song setting. So when later on I studied or started studying classical composition, I found a lot of links between stuff that I learned intuitively or just by playing with others, and things that could be more um, arranged through counterpoint and harmony and structure based musical forms. So so yeah, counterpoint was one of the tools that got my attention and my passion from the beginning. In fact, I very early on in my bachelor studies, I started to assist a professor in a counterpoint class, because I became like very obsessed with contrapuntal techniques, relation canons, all that stuff. Some of the, there is this kind of esotericism in older polyphony, in very early polyphony, like Ars Nova and early Renaissance music. These hidden structures that are super uh, super like architectural, like math-based compositions, in which the math is not in the surface, but I am really influenced by that type of musical thinking. And the common thread, because I don't think I'm answering your question right, but I think that the common thread between the songwriting or song performance background, counterpoint, and a lot of what I try to do compositionally is melody. I think I find myself always, even without planning it, I find myself always leaning towards a very melodic thinking. So putting melody in the front, and thinking about the different layers of a composition in terms of the line is a common thread between all these manifestations, and I think it's also what probably comes across in a piece like this duet that I written recently. Yeah.
Yeah, and the duet for trombones that I referenced, that is influenced by, is that a Palestrina piece? I believe,
It's a piece by Guillaume de Machaut, actually.
Michaud, the
Yeah.
other one that we're supposed to know for music history.
Yeah, no, and yeah, actually, you mentioned that one. Yeah, that again uh, is me filtering out uh, certain notes and fragments of a pre-existing piece, and trying to come up with a sound world that is both like ancient and new at the same time. But then again, the two trombones are kind of the shadow self of one another, and they have this constant ping pong relationship that also comes from early counterpoint. This Hocket style of writing is something that I'm very fond of. So.
Yeah, and you mentioned songwriting a little bit ago.
I meant
And
to say fond, not found. Sorry.
No problem. You mentioned songwriting a little bit ago, and it's, I think it's obvious for anyone who listens to your music. There's this clear melodic influence that not only affects the melodies, but also the textures that you write with, and how the harmony is so clearly driving forward. I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about the album that you released not even a year ago. It's a set of songs that I had known you before you released the album, but I can't remember how many times I texted you about. I was like, I listened to this one and it was fantastic, and I finally listened to the whole one. It was incredible. Could you speak a little bit about that set of songs, and maybe the process for how you're writing them, the instrumentation, and just how the production of that kind of evolved throughout the piece?
Yeah, well, thank you for your words. And yeah, the Seer is this song cycle that came out as an album. The Seer means to say in English, or to express, to say. And that originated in a commission that I got in 2019 from an opera theater in Buenos Aires. They were calling duets of one composer and one poet, and the idea was to come up with recitals of songs of music and poetry. And I mean, it was a very open offer. We could do whatever we wanted, but the idea was to have these joint projects in which the two creative minds were someone from poetry and someone from music composition area. And so I was commissioned this piece along with Victoria Coccaro, who is an Argentinian poet and now friend, who writes amazing texts. She's also a researcher, but her poetry I find not only beautiful but sort of close to my sensibility in how she delivers words in the page. Certain things about rhythm and structure and the ideas she addresses in her poetry were something that captivated me from the beginning. So we started thinking we knew each other's work, but we haven't worked together before this project, and we started thinking what we wanted to do, and immediately the idea of writing a song cycle started to take shape, and this was something that I had wanted to do for a very long time, but hadn't had the opportunity or the proper context to do it. I had written vocal music before, but my previous vocal pieces probably are more academic, and at that time I really wanted to put my song-related influences in the front. And that is probably one of the reasons why I wrote counting me as one of the performers in the ensemble. So I knew I wanted a certain type of electric guitar sound that I could produce. I'm not a very skilled guitar player, but I like certain things, and this time I said, okay, I will write I will be one of the performers in the ensemble, and I will shape the sound around what I like about the electric guitar. And that immediately branched into calling a group of friends who are all like with one foot in the classical world and the other foot in the popular music world, so to speak. So the singer, who is probably the most prominent person in the cycle, Cecilia Pastorino, is a friend of mine. We did a bunch of projects together in the past, and she is a classically trained soprano, but she mostly sings South American folk music. At least right now, I think she is mostly focusing on folk. And she has this perfect balance in her voice of a classical training and a very direct and warm sound, and the way she delivers the texts is also I think very very influenced by popular music. So I was lucky to have Cecilia as the main singer, and also the percussionist is a classically trained percussionist that studied for many years in Brazil and has a bunch of background in Brazilian folk music. Percussionist is Daniela Cerveto, and Paulo Higo, who is the violist in the group, comes from tango. He was also even one of the founders of a very famous young tango orchestra some years ago in Buenos Aires. So, and that was it. I mean, instruments for which I wanted to write, because they are instruments that I am very fond of: viola, percussion, voice, and guitar, but also for performers that could move fluidly between a more classical sound and a more, I don't want to say raw, but more straightforward song-oriented type of sound and type of performance approach. So the music took shape based on that choice of musicians, and I worked with Victoria like in a very back and forth process, in which she was sending me a lot of texts, and I would choose certain fragments that I thought were more well suited for music, for a music setting. But in the beginning, it was a very big project, because we had like 45 or 50 minutes of stage time. So the music was only one aspect of the whole recital, which had also like recitation without music that Victoria did herself, and also a couple of visual devices in which the text was also only a visual manifestation on the stage. So we have music, recitation, and visuals all in a kind of a contrapuntal setting, and that had 4 or 5 performances in Buenos Aires in 2019, and then I decided I wanted to separate the music as its own entity, and so we went into the studio, we recorded the songs, I wrote a couple songs more that were not originally in the stage version, and I started to think about that thing as an album on itself. So yeah, so basically that's the story of it. And of course, we were recording and mixing at the end of 2019, and it was supposed to come out in 2020, and then we all know what happened, so things got delayed. And in the middle of 2020, I moved countries, so I ended up the master was finished. It was one of the last things I could do before moving countries, and then the process of releasing the album was something that happened when I was already here in the US.
Fantastic. And I'll put a link to that. It's available on Spotify, and you're able to buy the album on a couple different platforms, I believe.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just an incredible piece of music that I selfishly wanted to talk about in this interview about tuba stuff.
Yeah, and it was a very long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, I think it's very insightful, because how you speak about instruments and how you speak about melodies and textures, I think people will be able to realize all of that in the piece that you've recently written for tuba, euphonium, and piano. So can we move to the kind of the focal point of this, and could you talk a little bit about Hydra, and maybe about how you've approached writing for tuba, euphonium, and the textures, and just the compositional process of this piece? I find it very interesting, and I think we need to we need to know more from the master of this piece.
Yeah. So I think I told this same thing the last time. When I start to write a piece, I usually start with a question, and the question is about the nature of the instruments I'm writing for, but not so much about the nature of each specific instrument, but more. I am thinking of like in chamber music, for instance. I usually think about the whole ensemble as if I were building a mechanism, conceiving the whole ensemble as one instrument, and having each of the actual instruments taking part as if they were part of this bigger mechanism that has its own rules and behavior. And my role is inventing or discovering how each of these parts of the mechanism behave. And that the response to that answer usually is related with contrapuntal devices, but more in general, I like the idea of musical organisms that seem to behave as if they were only one instrument sounding, and not, the part of the violin and the part of the clarinet and the part of the piano, and you can hear all these things. Of course, you can hear all these things, but I like, at least I'd like to think about the composition as if everyone is working to build one sound. And that is certainly the case in the trombone duet that we were discussing before, and that is certainly the case in this piece, in which I really wanted to avoid thinking about the piano as an accompaniment. I wanted to think about the piano as an extension of the tuba, as if it were a kind of a reverberation machine for the tuba. So yeah, basically it's a very melodic piece in which there is, I approached the tuba part as if it could, the tuba could manage 2 or 3 part polyphonies. So there are these melodic jumps that, since they are very constant in the piece, they start to depict like as if they were 2 lines, and then almost 3 lines in different registers. And the piano basically takes up some of those notes and builds a sort of a shadow layer of what the tuba is doing, and hopefully that the resulting sound of that, and also the way the 2 performers interact, is one in which there's not so much of a separation between lead line and accompaniment, but more of a fusion of sorts. So that's one thing, and then yes, there is basically a melodic approach. There is one main melody that is constantly rotating upon itself, and so resulting in different variations. And while I was writing the very first sketches, I was reading this book by, which I have it here, you know, this so it's a great book it's called The Techniques of Tuba Playing by Jack Adler McKean. He discusses a lot of contemporary repertoire, very new repertoire, in fact, also including a lot of new complexity stuff and all that. But he does a very profound and well-documented research on the history of the instrument and the more basic techniques of the instrument that I, being kind of new to myself, writing for the tuba, I read it with a lot of interest, and I got hooked by the description of the serpent, of this sort of grandfather or grandmother, I don't know.
When you first sent me a sketch and the thing was called Hydra, there was a small part of my mind. It was like, is this about the serpent? I got to the bottom of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I kind of imagined the serpent as if it were really an animal, and I mean, this piece probably makes sense if I say that this piece was, it was kind of new to me to write a piece for tuba and as a solo instrument or as the main feature in the piece, and we were aiming for a music that is supposed to be performed by students or non-professionals or performers that are that have not yet mastered the instrument. And I was reading about the serpent, and I started to think about the serpentists as if they were, like fighting something, which is what we do when we play an instrument, especially if we don't master the instrument. So the image of Hydra came to mind. Hydra is this mythological many-headed monster in Greek mythology, which is fought by Hercules, right? And the story of Hydra is that the monster would grow a new head for each head that is chopped off. So I thought, okay, the Serpentist is fighting this many-headed monster, and the heads of this monster proliferate as the fight evolves, and that was actually something that it kind of happens in the piece, in the sense that there is this main tune that is constantly changing shape but appearing again, and that was for me like the metaphor for conceiving the whole piece, which I also think has a sort of a liquid quality to it in the way the type of sound and the way that it behaves rhythmically. I at least in my mind, it has a kind of a floating and liquid sort of behavior. So yeah, that's part of the idea.
That's fantastic, and it's always fantastic to hear these intriguing metaphors that go into notation.
Yeah.
We've grown and seen pieces, just ink on paper over time for years and years, and so hearing these intricacies and hearing these intentions always make just the visual aspect of looking at the music, and when people see the score and see how it's written, how it weaves, there is a serpentine quality just to the melody and to the line and to the overall texture. And so yeah, I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Francisco, not just for your time today, but for your willingness and enthusiasm to go on this tuba and euphonium journey with all of
Yeah,
us.
no, thank you for the invitation to write the piece, and the invitation to speak about it is yeah, it's always a pleasure to
Fan-
discuss this stuff.
Fantastic. And you of course have more music coming out. You have more music on your website, and so I hope anyone who listens to this and is intrigued by the musicianship presented, that they head on down to franciscodelpino.com and look at some scores and take out their wallet now. And we hope to hear a lot more of this and to hear a lot more from you very soon. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, Francisco.
Thank you, Matthew. Same to you, likewise.